in this episode, I'm so proud to be joined by Barrie John, and here he is. Barrie, how are you doing?
I'm great. I was nearly said good morning to you then, and it's not. It's
Yeah,
good evening. So I'm
depends
all
what.
right. Yeah, I'm challenging through the day at the moment, but yeah, really
Yeah,
good.
right. Well, okay. So I saw you on Most Haunted all
hmm
those years ago. I saw you do your speech at Paracon this year in the
Yeah.
north, and luckily I saw you on Are You Haunted's page, who I've also interviewed and I like. So, yeah, this suddenly became a thing. Here we are. Um, you've made a career out of being a medium, and a career means that you're good at it, okay?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Or lucky, depending, it's one or the other. I've worked with some mediums ghost
yeah.
hunting. Can you, in your words, describe the difference between you and me then? I am in no way a medium or a practiced medium. So what are you experiencing that I'm not?
I suppose. I mean, let's just jump back first of all. I mean, you say I've made a career out of it. I mean, I come from a very professional background as a career path, and really, my mediumship became a bit of a hobby for me. It became something that I've always had from being a child. Um, and I used to experience some very weird things. People stood outside windows waving at me, images falling from the sky, you name it. Very bizarre things when I was younger. And I've had to control this between a very legal professional career, what I do. And it's not been easy, I've got to be honest, because obviously there's things that I want to say to people when I know I can't. And, that's the biggest problem that I've always sort of envisaged in having a professional career with what I call a bit of a hobby that's taken over, really. And I mean, I've been utilizing my mediumship now for near on 40 years, from being quite young, really. And what it's allowed me to do is to go into buildings, into places, um, to see people on a private reading basis, on a face to face basis, and basically pick up things, sense things, be aware of other things. And it's not only being aware of energy; it's being aware of sort of communication points that take place around me, where I hear things and I get messages from people. Probably a little bit different to yourself, as a paranormal investigator myself. I always go into a building and I want to know about it. I want to feel the energy in there. I don't want to know the history because I don't believe in that. And I think so much history nowadays is sort of made up, and probably made up really to draw people to it. And I think what you're better off doing is going in there what I refer to as naked. And I don't mean undressed, but you go in there not knowing anything. And what you come out with is the evidence for me. Now,
Mm.
when I've worked on many events with companies, and with members of the public, I want them to have an experience as well. So what I'll do is I'll take them through very simple sort of mediumship processes, opening up psychic abilities, getting people to do almost experiments with me. But also experiments on them on their own. That could be anything like a lone vigil, for instance, or getting somebody to sit in a room and just see what they feel. And the best people I always find are skeptics, to be honest, people that don't believe at all, because you'll find that very often something will always happen to those people because they've gone in there quite open, and they're going in there a little bit like what I do because I never know what's going to happen. And as I've always said to people, I've always described myself as a skeptical medium because I don't just go into a building and go, oh gosh, it's all haunted. I want to know more about it. I want to know, why is it haunted? Who's there? What connections are there? And this all obviously happens over a period of time. But I think probably the difference between us is that I'm probably more sort of aware of my mediumistic abilities and what's out there. But also remember, I'm a paranormal investigator as well, no different to yourself, where I want to go into buildings and establish information. So whether you're looking at it from a mediumship perspective or you're looking at it from a paranormal investigation perspective, we all want the same result. We want to try and prove that there's an element of life after death, whatever you wish to call that. We want to prove that there is something that's there that has got an element of intelligence that's going to communicate with us in some way. That could be many ways, as you know, with equipment nowadays. I mean, remembering when I first started out, we had no equipment like what we've got nowadays. It was very simple things, and a lot of it was really what I call homemade things, like marbles and coins and glasses and bits of paper and a pen, because what we've found is over the years that the paranormal world and the metaphysical world has changed so much that it shows me that now, with some of the equipment we've got, people really do want to prove that there's something there. My question to people would be that if you've got all this equipment and you're going into buildings and you're doubting it, why have you got all the equipment and why have you spent so much money on it? Because I think what we need to try and do as an industry nowadays is prove ourselves as professional people who are prepared to go in with equipment, go in with knowledge, information, and see what we can clarify and confirm from it. That's the first thing I always look at. I mean, if we're looking at mediumship for me works very, very different to paranormal investigation, because, you can imagine if I'm doing a demonstration for 300 people, I don't know any of those people that are there. I've got no idea who's going to turn up. I don't know who's bought tickets. We never really sell tickets ourselves for events. What we do is allow venues to sell them on our behalf. So even when people are contacting us and going, oh, well, if I give you my name or my bank details, you're going to trace me. I don't know. I don't have that information to hand. So, it's impossible for me to do that. But when I go into a demonstration, into a public forum to do a demonstration, I work in a different way, because what I do is I open myself up to the channel up above, whichever you wish to call that, and I just go, right, who wants to talk to Chris? Who wants to talk to this lady over here? And I just go with that, But when we're working on paranormal and we're working on being investigators, I want to feel the energy in a room, and sometimes you'll find with me, I'll want to sit in a room on my own, or I'll walk around first of all, just to see where I feel drawn. Now, I think the way that the paranormal's changed nowadays is so different, as I said, to what we used to have, where very much we were all very mediumship led. Whereas nowadays, I think we've gone a little bit more equipment led than mediumship led. Whereas the way that we always used to do it was, if I was the guest medium or the medium on a paranormal event, I'd go in there and say, right, this is what I'm picking up, this is what I'm getting. And what we do is then use equipment to almost confirm it or clarify it. If I'm saying, I don't know, I'm picking something up in the corner of a room, then I might say to somebody, right, go over there with a K2, an EMF meter, whatever, a pendulum, whatever, and see what you can get, keep me out of it. And excuse me, it's a little bit like when we do things like table tipping on paranormal events. I never go near it. I stand back and I let people control it. I'm there. I'm watching what they're doing, making sure that obviously nobody's deliberately trying to push it. But really, again, it's giving the individuals an experience. So I suppose there's a couple of different things we could look at. We could look at mediumship demonstrations. We could look at me going in there with a paranormal team to do a paranormal investigation, or you look at me going in there as a guest medium with a group of public to give them an experience. And there's some very different sort of circumstances there that take place.
Well, I want to drill down first into, I guess, as a child. Now, bearing in mind, we are of a similar age. I'm 50 now. And my heroes as a kid were like Doris Stokes and Harry Price. And I was talking like 10-year-old. So that's why it's kind of a full circle to talk to someone who's been doing it so long as you now. But what do you actually see? I suppose that child of a 10, when I was 10, would think that you would see a fully fledged person that nobody else could see walk up and start talking to you. But that's not exactly how it works, right?
Well, that's a couple of different things there. I mean, yes, I do see people. I see. I don't know, if I was doing a reading for somebody, I might see a mum or dad stood next to them, or a loved one. Let's call it that. But a lot of the time, it's voices in my head. And basically, it's getting them to show themselves to me then and go, right, what did you look like? Tell me what you look like. How tall were you, etc., etc. So I'm a big believer that, it takes them a lot of energy to try and come through to us. And what they'll do is try and use as small a bit as possible, unless we start pushing them and going, right, what did you look like? Show me what you look like. But it works different with different spirits. I mean, funnily enough, I've done a reading tonight for a gentleman. His wife passed 2 months ago, and she came through clear as day. Absolutely tremendous information. I brought people back within hours of them passing. And it really depends on the individual in terms of, let me call it, how much they believed in the afterlife. Because if somebody's going to go over, and we've had this constant, we get this all the time. It's a constant thing where if somebody is very, I don't like using the word skeptic because I describe myself as skeptic. What skeptic means to me is there's a belief, but you want an element of proof.
Scientific.
I'd sooner call them non-believers. If you've got a non-believer, they're the people that really are the hard challenge for me on a mediumship demonstration or even on a ghost event.
Yeah, well, it's almost impossible for you to make me feel or see what you're seeing, because I can walk into this house and think, I've got a feeling there's a male energy. And I convince myself that if it's going to be a man, is it a man or a woman? Okay, it's a man, tall. And all I'm doing now is describing what I'm imagining. He wears dirty clothes, he's holding a spade, wears a flat cap. Oh, he's probably from the 1940s. And you could be doing that. Do you know what I mean? But that's what I mean. I'm not wanting to have that conversation. I'm not wanting to be a doubter. I'm wanting to be, okay, just tell me, and I'll take it every word as what you say is gospel. So there's a difference between us both seeing a ghost apparition and you seeing it and I can't see it. So have you ever touched them? Have you ever put your hand in them?
No, not at all. No, because I don't believe that's possible, to be honest. We're talking of a different energy form. It's the typical sort of scenario where you'd reach out and you'd probably go through them. But then I'd have to go back on that actually and say, when I've sat in things like physical demonstrations and you get invited to go and touch the hand of a medium, and it's not the hand of the medium that you're touching, that's when you feel things very, very differently. And I think this is where, when we talk about paranormal, people forget that there's a whole other world out there in terms of physical mediumship, trance mediumship, which is the art of materialization and making things materialize. And I know we can have the classic old stories with people where they go, oh, well, it's cheesecloth, it's this, it's that, Yeah. But I've physically sat in myself, I sit for physical mediumship, but I've sat in physical mediumship demonstrations where the medium has been fastened down to a chair, everybody's been holding hands, and you come back round and the medium's moved out of the chair and sat in the middle of the room or in a corner, or you'll get invited to go and hold hands that come out the cabinet, and it can't be the medium because the medium's fastened to the chair. So it's a different sort of thing, really. And now I'm going a little bit more sort of advanced to what we're talking about. But if I was doing like a paranormal investigation or a mediumship demonstration, no, I wouldn't be that close to the spirit to be able to touch them, put it that way. But then when I've done investigations before, I've had things that I've felt have walked through me, or I've walked through them, I've walked through their pathway. And you get that sort of what I describe as a lightning bolt. It's a little bit probably like getting an electric shock where it just makes you stop dead in your steps. So I think there's many ways that the spirit world can affect us and can cause us to recognise their presence, really. But I think when people talk about, have you touched a ghost? I'd have to say no.
Okay. As you say, I've had an experience very early on where I felt freezing, like fridge cold on my front, then on my insides, then on my back, and then my sister behind me felt the same thing, a cold walk through her. And so because we both felt it, now I didn't get an electric shock, but that was my interpretation of what happened. So you and I share a similar place because I have always used the Ouija board. Yeah. You do what you do. So the third person talking to us both is going to be equally as skeptical. But you've got your finger on the glass, Chris. You're all, it could be your subconscious.
Yeah.
So I can't be outside of myself that, well, no, I'm telling you, we get together and this is what we do. And some days, rare, I suppose, we get what seems like crystal clear conversations,
Mm,
beautiful
mm,
conversations, and then other times mixed, and quite a lot of the time nothing. Even if it moves, we're getting gobbledygook.
mm,
So
mm.
it's like, I imagine that you yourself could have really good days and days where it's a struggle.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, if I was so say for instance on a public paranormal investigation, if I've got a Ouija board there, I would encourage the public to use it, not me. But what I would do is I would tune in from a mediumistic perspective, and I would probably start bringing people's loved ones through and going, right, this is your gran, this is your dad, this is your auntie, whatever, and almost getting the board to use that as a confirmation thing, and then to say, right, well, you spell out your name, okay, spell out the name. And I'd get those sort of things. But, I've had it before, exactly like you. I mean, if I do private seances at people's houses, they always want me to take a Ouija board along because they want to have a try of it at the end of the night. But again, I wouldn't touch that unless I felt as though I needed to give it a bit of what I call kickstart. I wouldn't go near it. I'd let them do it, and I would then do it from a mediumship perspective. But if I'm doing one myself privately, and I invite friends round to the house, my family come round to the house, and we'll do the Ouija board, and we have some very sort of provable information come through that, things that we know, and because of what I do, I'm able to pick up straight away who I feel as though it is before they've even moved it, and I go, right, I know who's coming in now, and if I want to be what I call like the controller of it, so I want to be the one that communicates, I'd come away from it and I would let other people do it, because what I don't want to do is influence that, exactly like you've said. And I've seen this a lot on events where subconsciously somebody wants it so badly that they actually start moving it themselves. I play lots of little tricks on paranormal investigations because I always watch how people have their fingers on glasses or what they're doing, how they stood. If I felt as though somebody was pushing it, I'd go round the table basically and ask each person to take the finger off, see what happens. And you can always find out where it gets that sort of disjointedness that comes in, where you can identify that somebody is pushing that deliberately. And sometimes,
Yeah.
remember, people find it great fun to try and scare friends with it, and they will move it on purpose. But then, as I say, if I'm doing a private event at home, whatever you wish to call that, I want to communicate with my own loved ones, then, we do it at home, and then I would use it at home. I always have done.
Well, as far as I can see it, being a medium and having the Ouija board at your fingertips in private, you could have some very deep, I guess, conversations with a spirit.
Yeah.
Now, we've on our best days at different locations, we can ask the same questions and we get the same answers, as if the spirit world agrees with the whatever the other spirit said.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what have you learned about the afterlife and how it's set up?
I suppose for me, with the afterlife, number one, I believe when people cross over, they pass instantly. I believe that they're cured of all illnesses as of that moment of passing, because we lose the physical presence. We have no physical body. Therefore, we have nothing that is there to ache or hurt anymore. I also believe and feel that when people cross over, their loved ones are very often sat waiting for them. And I used to do a lot of work with a local hospice, where families used to ask me to sit with loved ones when they were getting to the point of passing. And some of the stories are phenomenal, very moving in a way, where people have sat up in bed and called out to loved ones, pointed to loved ones who aren't actually there. And, some of them will say, I don't know, it's my husband who's come to collect me. And I think that is tremendous. That really shows me that there must be something there. Now, I know everybody could turn around and go, oh, well, it was the medication. Maybe they were a bit delirious. But I've also seen this myself from my own personal circumstances with my own mum when she passed, where her physical capabilities weren't good enough for what happened when she sat up in bed, because my mum, basically her spine collapsed, but she literally sat up in bed and reached out, and that was it. And you think, okay, there's a lot more to this then than what we realise. I think there's an element of intelligence with the spirit world, and I think we have to recognise that, and I think we have to be respectful of that as well as paranormal investigators and as mediums, where very often, I'm sure you've seen it and I've seen it on events where people are quite rude and disrespectful when they're communicating with the other side, and very
Yeah.
demanding in a way. And I always think, well, hang on a minute, these were real, we're saying these are real people and were real people. So let's talk to them like real people. There's no need to demand or disrespect or swear at them, And I think I often look at this, if I was over the other side and if somebody was screaming and shouting at me and demanding that I do this now, I'd probably just sit there and think, not a chance, because that's the sort of person I am. But I think over the years, with the amount of investigations I've done, there's been certain things that have happened. And I've thought, I can't doubt this, and that's me as a medium, I can't doubt this. Things that I've seen, when I've seen chairs move, when I've seen furniture move, when I've seen doors unlatch themselves, and trust me, I try and recreate things that, I've always described myself as one of these. I don't just go into a building and go, right, everything's paranormal. Oh my God, let's start running around screaming and shouting. No, let's investigate this building and let's see what we can find. And if I find the same thing happens time and time and time again, then I have an element of belief. If I go into a room and suddenly I hear a pipe click, then I go, actually, dismiss that, because you can't. You can't just go around saying everything's a paranormal activity when you've got no proof from it. And one of the things I often encourage when I do my own sort of public investigations is I encourage people to write down notes of times when things happened, what happened at that specific time. And if there was 3 or 4 groups, I would then look at comparing the notes and going, right, did everybody hear that in different locations, or was this just in one location? And that's where it starts to get a little bit interesting. But I think where people probably get a bit confused with me at times, they assume that as soon as I go into a building, I go, yeah, it's all haunted. Well, I don't. I've been in some places and into buildings, people's houses, where I thought, actually, you know what? I don't get anything in here at all. And what we find nowadays is that with certain individuals, we don't know their mental health conditions. We don't know medication conditions. We don't know what we're dealing with when people are calling us into properties or homes. And I think we have to be very mindful about that to give us that professionalism. I get a lot of phone calls from members of the public where they've called paranormal groups into people's homes, into their homes, to say that they've got a presence of some kind. And I go, well, what did they do about it? And they say, well, they didn't, they just left. And I think that's really quite hard for people to sort of understand, because they're calling people like us in because they have an issue or a problem. And we shouldn't just leave them hanging. We should be able to either deal with it or sort it out, or go, actually, yeah, well, there is something, but it's never going to hurt you. It's not a problem. And I think that's something else that I just want to add in there, that at times we perceive when we get paranormal activity that it's all bad. And I want to go, no, it's not. It could just be somebody coming back to go, do you know what? I'm all right. I did live here and I'm quite happy where I am, but I'm just letting you know I'm here because you've asked me to prove myself. And I think what we have to do when we go into investigations is we have to go in on our own merits and not take account of other people's experiences, and especially things such as television over the years, and especially, some of the shows where things are always very dark and sinister, which I think is great for entertainment, but it doesn't do us a lot of justice in terms of proving life after death.
Mm. So you've spoke to spirits, and what do you think the afterlife is like, though? What have they told you? This is what happens. They go over, and what is it? Is it a room? Is it?
They just say that they carry on exactly the same. They talk of a place of knowledge and learning. And they talk about coming back when it's their time to learn a lesson again. So maybe they bring information back or knowledge back. And I always think of almost like a two-way travel, I suppose, in a way, where I'll talk for myself, when it's my time to pass, maybe I've learned my lesson in life, and maybe I'm taking something back for me, back upstairs, whatever you wish to call it. But then maybe in another 5 years, I might return to live a life again, and that's what the spirit world always taught me about: a place of learning, a place of knowledge, a place of sharing information. They don't talk about living in homes or anything like that. They don't give me that information. And I perceive it almost to be, what would you call it? I'm going to refer to it as a place such as heaven in a way, because the only way I can think of how to say it to people, I think we all just live together and we just get on with things. I think our loved ones who have passed before us, animals, pets, etc., are all there waiting for us. And that's the way that I work with them when they come back, to connect with their own loved ones. They don't come back on material basis. I don't get any sort of possessions, if that makes sense, over that side.
But what about reincarnation?
I believe in reincarnation. I believe that we do come back,
And have they given you any...
back. Yeah, I believe that we come back time and time again. People go through past life regression phases. I believe that we've all had experiences here before. I don't believe people that we meet on this earth plane are the people that we meet for the first time. I think we've all met somewhere on a previous life path.
Well, what you've said, all that, does check out with what the spirits have told me through the Ouija board.
Yeah.
Several times, that reincarnation is how it works. They've all agreed. You come back 7 times to have 8 existences on Earth. And it's a learning process. It's a school. It's like, this is the afterlife. You start there and you choose to come here, have an exam. What have you learnt while you were down there?
That's a real good way to put it, actually. I like that, And
then it's like, well, I did this from in my life. I know all about geography. You know what I mean? I've travelled, learnt all these things. You whip back, and then it's like, right, when you're ready, you can hang about here as long as you want, and time's different, But then if you don't have to go back, but if you wanted to go back, you've got this many options, and it's like getting a karate belt of colours, and you're handicapped in a life maybe, and you learn this other set of things. Go
on. No, you're fine. I believe exactly that. I believe it's a lesson that you learn, and I believe that you bring information 2 ways. So things that we go through on this earth plane, whatever it is, certain circumstances, whatever, probably we need to experience that to go back upstairs and go, well, actually, I tried that, and this is what happened to me. And somebody upstairs might go, oh, well, the same thing happened to me. And then somebody else has to experience that as well. So I like the way you've said about almost like a school in a way, where you come down here for your exam, and it does make total sense to me. And that's very often what the spirit world will talk about. I mean, it's funny, really, because I used to get into the habit of doing a Ouija board, not on a weekly basis, but on a regular basis with some friends at home. And if ever we started before the time when we committed to start, nothing had happened. But as soon as that minute hand hit that 9 o'clock slot, the Ouija board would start moving, and we'd go, well, where you been? And they go, well, we weren't ready for you. You told us 9 o'clock, so we said it would be 9 o'clock. And this is where I look at them upstairs, that I think they're quite clever characters. Well, exactly like us in a way. It's that element of intelligence that I think we don't give them credit for at times.
Yeah. With the whole learning thing, and it is the spirit that's learning, that, we spoke to them about what life they're on, what level, I normally say. And they've told us, I've said, well, how many times have I been alive? And it's like, oh, you're on your 6th level now. So I've got 2 more existences on Earth when I choose throughout time to go, allegedly. And this kind of got me thinking about the stains. I was born as a person, you would say, oh, he's a miserable little sod. Do you know what I mean? And it's almost like I've brought that from a previous...
from a previous existence or life.
It wasn't mine. It wasn't something I'd got on this plane.
Yeah.
And I realise this sounds like I'm an absolute loon, but, this is what the spirits have told me over 14 years, and all agree. And it's like, well, I'm just going to take what they say as, and that's why I wanted to hear your view about all those years that you've done it.
Yeah. And I mean, in a way, I'm going to agree with what you've just said there, because I take spirit on what they're telling me. And that's what I have to do, because if I'm doing it on a demonstration basis, I have to go with the information that's given to me.
Yeah.
And I know earlier on you were having a bit of a joke about, if you walked into a room and I walked into a room, would it be somebody's imagination? Would it be what you're actually getting? But I think that comes over years of sort of experience, really. I mean, I know when I work that I go off a little bit like what I call a rifle or a machine gun in effect with information. And if I'm teaching people, I always say to them, don't analyze information because you will change it. It's very
Yeah.
easy to do that. You could, I don't know, you could walk into my room here and, like you say, you could go, is it a male? Well, I think it might be a female. How tall? Well, they could be 5 foot or they might be 6 foot. Well, you've suddenly, you've started to put your own interpretation on it. And that's one of the things I stop people doing when I'm training them or running them through workshops is don't put your own interpretation on it. If you're getting a female who's 5 foot tall, you're getting a female who's 5 foot tall. She's not 6 foot tall. And it's going with that first impression. And that's where I'll jump back to paranormal investigations. Anything I've done in terms of paranormal, whether it be a filmed event, TV, whatever, or whether it be a normal public event, I've always gone with my first gut feeling of a room. And that's why I find it hard sometimes with some of the TV shows, because as you know, I've done it, and it's not easy because if you stood in the wrong position, you have to walk out the room and walk back in. Well, I've suddenly lost that impression what I've got of the room because I know what the room looks like now. And then when you're doing that 4 and 5 and 6 times, just because they want to get you in the right position, it sort of defeats the object of what I've done in the first place. And to be honest, then I've actually forgot what I picked up first of all, because it suddenly becomes more of a TV performance rather than a paranormal investigation.
Yeah, yeah. Have you seen the spirits give off colours, like auras, I'm going to say?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something that I would teach people in terms of sort of basic psychic awareness, very, very general basic classes where we talk about everything has a living aura or an energy field around it, whether it be an animal, a plant, an object, whatever. It has an element of an aura. And that's what, in effect, I would tap into if I was doing somebody a reading. So if I was doing a reading for somebody, I would almost expand my energy into theirs and go, right, what am I picking up now? And that's how I tend to do it. Same as if I was doing a demonstration in a room, what I do is I blow out, it sounds a bit bizarre, I blow out my energy in the room, my aura, to basically touch everybody in that room. And then I go, right, where do I feel drawn at this moment in time? And we've all had it, we've all been to mediumship demonstrations. I'm sure everybody knows how they work. But, when you've got a room of a lot of people, hundreds of people, you can't touch everybody at the same time. And you can't give everybody that message because, I believe that when the spirit world comes through, they go to the people who I believe need the information, not just going around the room willy-nilly in a way. So I think it's utilizing that energy, and I love teaching that because, as I say, it's very basic. But this is where you start to see people opening up and looking at color and working with it, because we don't only talk about that in terms of psychic. We could talk of it in terms of a healing ability, or where does somebody need some emotional healing, or what they're going through in life. Because I believe your aura holds lots of, let's call it, indentations of things that have happened to you through your life path. You'll see very often that if you're teaching somebody, we talk about the certain colours, but blue's always around sort of the throat area. And you find when people start talking about that, then we can start reading and going, oh, well, is somebody holding on to something? Is there something that you need to say in a relationship, or et cetera, et cetera? And you start building this up into almost a little bit of a mediumship reading then, because then you'll start getting communication coming through as well. So I think working with colour for me is quite fascinating. It's very basic. But certainly, I think it starts people off on their mediumship pathway.
Well, interesting, because we first stumbled upon it by asking a question to a spirit.
Yeah.
We were talking about, do we emit colours? It was what came out, and they were like, oh yeah, you all have auras. And we were like, what, you can see our colours? And we were like, oh, what colour is this one? What colour is this person? And we all got colours assigned. And then, over a year or two, you'd ask, hey, spirit, or a different place entirely, can you see us giving off any colours? Do we emit colours? Oh, yeah. And we'll see if the same colours, gave off. And for many people, they
Yeah,
did. But
yeah,
for the odd person, they didn't. And so the questions persisted. Well, what do these colours represent? Is it this? No. Is it this? No. Well, can't you just stop saying no and tell us what it is? And it were like, no, I can't tell you what it is. It seemed to be, again, your colour changed when you went through a growth. Again, a stage of learning. If you'd had, I'm going to say divorce, just as an
yeah,
example.
yeah.
Once you've been through a something like that, a monumental part of life, a loss, your colour might change. It's almost, again, like a gradient of
Yeah.
you're a newbie, you're more advanced, you've learnt 5 things, 10 things. They've never answered full on, but that was the closest we sort of got. I know that my colour, I gave off a non-colour. It was like, he has an aura, but it's not of any colour. No idea what that even meant, but didn't get
I'd
an outright
imagine.
answer.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to jump back to something that I've mentioned earlier. You know, when I said auras have indentations,
Yeah.
and that's exactly a good example what you've just given. If somebody's gone through a divorce or gone through a major illness, that'll be reflected in the aura, because you'd look at a person and you would find the color would change somewhere, or you'll find like they might be. How would I say it? I always describe it as the ready break man. If you're as old as us, people will
That's
know
how
what the
I
ready
think
break
of
man
it.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but what you'll find is, maybe, I don't know, for instance, you might get to my shoulder and there might be a totally different color there, or it might be quite
Okay.
dark or black or something, or red. I don't know,
Right.
but this is where it changes with things that have happened to you in life. That's my view of it.
Hmm. Interesting. Right. So I always thought, because you come from through your mother, I believe. That's kind of your
Yes.
gift, came through your mother, your
Yeah.
grandmother, and I always
Yeah.
thought it's got to be either you're born with it or you're not. I'm always very, you can't learn it. You either are or you aren't. But then I was speaking to mediums, they're always like, everyone can be a medium. It's just that they haven't tuned in.
What I always say, as you're absolutely right. I come from a long line of psychic abilities, mediumship abilities, which has been great for me. But as a child, I had no idea what it was. Remember, I had
Yeah.
no idea what it was. I just knew I was experiencing things that were very bizarre for me. But what I always say is, everybody has a psychic ability. That isn't about being a medium. That's been about being a psychic. That's being able to walk into a room and go, oh, something doesn't feel right. Or walking into a house and going, oh, this feels like a nice home. It's not about communicating with the dead. But what we can do is we can start then opening people up to it. Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to be a tremendous psychic. I
Mm.
think everybody has the ability, once their mind is almost, let's call it, programmed in a way, to understand the information, what they're getting. And I mean, I've run groups now for, oh gosh, I can't remember, 20, 25 years, probably more than that, something like that. And I've had people who have come to me with, pardon our word, this no ability whatsoever.
Mm.
And then suddenly they're giving messages to people that their mum's with them. This was a name, this is the details, this what she looks like, and yet they've never met, they've never seen a picture of this person either. And I think this is pretty remarkable. And one of the things I've always said to all my students, I never want you to be like me. I want you to be better than me. And that's why I will put all my time into people to make them better. Because, over the time, I've learned some real harsh lessons with my mediumship. The things that some of the information I've got for people has been quite upsetting for me. Some of the things I've got, I thought, what the hell is this? This doesn't make sense to me at all. But then you have to remember that it shouldn't make sense to people like me. It makes sense to the sitter, the person that's sat in front
Yes.
of me.
Mm.
But, I do believe that we all have a psychic ability. As I said, that's not about communicating with dead people. That's being able to walk into a room, pick something up, know if somebody's in a bit of a bad mood or somebody's in an emotional mood, whatever you wish to call it.
Yeah.
But then we can develop that into somebody working with mediumship. Absolutely. And I do believe everybody can do it, but at different levels. Because I think I've always said this, the thing that makes you a medium is the experience of life. things that you've been through, whether that be losing a partner, a parent, a child, a loved one, an animal. Something seems to wake you up. And this is what I find when I'm working with people, when I'm going through workshops with people. They come because of something happening to them. Okay, whether they've lost a loved one, whether they've had a health problem, but that seems to be the thing that they go, actually, you know what? There's more to life here. There's got to be something that wakes me up.
Lost my train of thought there. What I was going to ask you about. So I've asked you about becoming a medium.
Yeah.
Are there places like when you're more open, having a hot bath, falling asleep? Is that when the voices get louder? You know, there's certain times where, going around Morrison's and I'm thinking about something. That's when it
Well,
least happens. You know.
Well, you see, this is where it gets quite funny for me because people, and I see this time and time again, because they go, do you open and close? Do you turn off at night? And I go, no, I don't. I just get on with it because, you know, if the spirit world want to talk to me and talk to you, for instance, I'm going to give you a message. But, you know, there has to be an appropriate time. That's what I consider. And walking around Morrison's or Asda isn't an appropriate time for me, you know, and same as like, I've always had a bit of a policy with the other side where, you know, look, when I need my rest, I need my rest. You know, I can work for you, but I can't work 24/7. And it always makes me laugh when people are starting out on this pathway where they'll message me and go, do you know what, they woke me up at 1:00 last night and I had to write something down. And I go, well, why did you do it? Well, they woke me up. They told me that I got to do it. Well, tell them to come back when you're awake. You know, they shouldn't be waking you up like that. And I think that's where you've got to be quite harsh on it or quite firm. I love the example what you said there about when you're falling asleep, because it's one of the things I always say to people about meditation. And people will tell you lots of stories about meditation. I remember many, many years ago, somebody who I knew was said, oh my God, I meditated and I disappeared for 2 weeks. And I'm thinking, what are you on about? All meditation is a form of sleep state. So the worst that's going to happen to you is you're going to fall asleep, but you'll just wake up in the morning. That's all. You don't disappear for 2 weeks and suddenly, you know, come around and think, oh, what day is it today?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think this is where I get quite annoyed with people with some of the stories, what they put out, because I think it's a little bit like, almost like self-promotion in a way for them. You know, it's like going, oh my God, did you know I can do this? Well, no, actually, it doesn't work like that for a start, you know. And I think that's where, and I'm going to word this quite unprofessionally, that's where the stupidism comes into it for me, because it spoils it for all of us. No different to when people are going into buildings and creating things in buildings, you know, and I've seen this time and time again where people almost come up with weird characters in buildings. And I'm thinking, what are you on about here? Where did this come from? You know, let's be honest here. Is this us being sensible or just being blatantly stupid? And I think, and I think that's what we've got to be really, really mindful of. You know, we've got to be sensible about it because, you know, the times come now where, you know, the TV series have done us a lot of good publicity and also a lot of bad publicity. I've got to say that at the same time. But I think what we should be doing now as a paranormal community or a metaphysical community is trying to work together. This isn't about anybody being better than others and somebody getting something better than what somebody else gets. We've got to show an element of, I suppose I could call it solidarity. We've got to come forward now and go, look, we are professional people. We're prepared to investigate things professionally. And we're not just going to make things up as we go along. You know, we can't do that. And I think, for me, this is where it takes a different balance in terms of mediumship demonstration shows, where people will come to those shows, go away with a level of information that's been passed to them. And, you know, I always say to them, you need to ask your friends and family as well, people that are close to you. You know, maybe you've got to speak to mum or grandma or dad or whatever, just to clarify something. And I've got too many examples, Chris, that have been given to me when I've done shows where people have emailed me the next day and gone, oh my God, I never knew that. I've asked my dad or I've asked my mum and they've told me, yeah, you were right. And I know what it's like. You know, I mean, I'm, as you can imagine, I'm a medium's nightmare when they're trying to read me, because I will make somebody work to get me a message. I won't just accept it. And if I can't accept it, I'll tell them I can't accept it.
Mm.
And I mean, we've done a lot of family research. We know our family goes all the way back to what, the 1300s. And we've got some phenomenal history in there as well. But what I don't like to see is people trying to force a message on people and almost go, well, you're going to just take it with you, Chris. Just take it with you. Because
Yeah.
that's not fair. That's not fair on anybody.
Mm. You're wrong and I'm right, and one day we'll
Yeah,
find
yeah. And
out.
it's a horrible attitude, isn't it?
Yeah. To jump back, I remembered my thought that the skill of mediumship from being born with it to learning it is like golf. We're all capable of playing golf, but it just happens that I'm shit at it, and Tiger Woods had an inherent
So am I.
ability.
So
You know
am
what I
I,
mean?
yeah.
But it's like that, isn't it? It's like you were born with it running in your blood, I guess.
Yeah,
Whereas,
but yeah,
is that a good analogy or not?
no, you're absolutely right, and I think that's a great way to do it. I mean, I've tried playing golf, and I'm rubbish at it because I have too much of a bad temper, to be honest. So I normally end up throwing the clubs or something.
Yeah.
But I think having it when I was growing up and not recognizing it was almost quite fearful for me, a bit of a scare factor in a way, because I used to think, what is this? And what is this coming out of the darkness almost, And
Terrifying.
yeah, and I've had to learn to live with that for quite a few years when I was younger, and think, God Almighty, what is this? And it wasn't until I started having my own experiences. And I remember one of them was a long time ago, and I was sat on our old staircase at the family home at the bottom of the stairs on the phone when we used to have telephones with cables and things like that where they wouldn't move very far. And I remember talking away, and suddenly I felt a hand on my shoulder. And I thought, oh God, is that somebody trying to come past me? And I turned around and there was nobody there. But honestly, that was my first proper experience as a child of feeling a hand on my shoulder. And as soon as that happened to me, I'm not kidding you, everything just started opening up for me. I remember my grandma coming back when she'd passed, sitting on the end of my bed. As a child, I got hit by lightning. And all these sort of things that suddenly started just ricocheting for me. And I often wonder, what was the point of where the spirit world woke me up, if I can call it that? What was that point where they said to me, you've got an ability, you need to recognize that ability now? Now, I don't remember that point. I've got to be honest. I know things happened to me when I was a child and I got through them. But, the first sort of card readings I used to do was probably 10, 11, 12 years of age. And I had a set of tarot cards and I used to do them for fun for my mum's friends because I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing. It was just going with them and seeing what come out. And I think with any sort of paranormal, any sort of mediumship, it's all an experiment. We don't know how it's going to work and what's going to happen. Even now, people will say to me, how does your mediumship work? And I go, don't know. I have no idea how it works, because all I know is somewhere somebody can sit in front of me or on a phone or on a connection somewhere, and I start getting information and it's like talking to you, but somewhere in here I've got another conversation that's taking place. And I'm thinking, what is this all about? Where's this coming from? And I think we have to almost put aside the understanding of it and go with what's coming through, and that's why I'm always happy to talk to people about my experiences, about their experiences, because I think you will hit a point where suddenly somebody wakes up and starts looking into the mediumship a little bit more. It's phenomenal. It really is.
Now, I always wanted to have multiple mediums come with us. I wanted at least 3 because I wanted to see them all not pick up on the same spirit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Catch them out. I hold my hand up. You say you're a medium. Please come and help me with my investigating.
Yeah.
Because when the Ouija board is dead and you're all staying in this room full, it makes the evening worthwhile. And now we don't do public events, okay? I'm talking about my group of friends who are solidly doing it. So it's nothing to do with anybody else. But yeah, and then they didn't like it. And
really?
Yeah. Now they're all in private. They'd all say, I like to come and do it. I like to prove it to myself. I like to prove myself that I'm not mental. All right. Well, you'll be glad to know that she's coming as well tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, is she? And then I'm thinking to myself, well, surely I'd be thinking, well, if you get spirit A and you get spirit B, that's still fine. I'm not going to know. And that doesn't eradicate what you're saying. I'm not going to say you didn't get the same spirit.
But
There's a
you see
get
that,
out.
yeah, and you know that I was actually going to say something then, and I'm probably going to get slated for saying this, but I'm not bothered. I'm going to say it. And what you'd probably find is that if you got three mediums together, you'll probably find you'll get a lot of ego suddenly starting to take hold, where somebody wants to be better than number one, and somebody wants to
Yeah.
be better than number two, and number three's got to be better than all of them all together.
Mm.
And I think what you'll find is almost an element of jealousy that starts taking effect. Now, when
Mm.
I've done stage shows or theatre shows, very often I'll have a guest with me. But what I tend to do is do triple links or double links. So I could be doing a reading for one person, then suddenly start reading a person on the next row and a person in the back corner, and I'm getting a different spirit for all of them. Now I've done it as well on events, I'll not say events, on public demonstrations, where I've had somebody working with me. We've got the same recipient, so maybe you, for instance. I might have, and I'm making this up by the way, I might
Yeah.
have granddad, and they might have your great auntie or something. But
Yeah.
suddenly, somewhere in between, we get the same message, if that makes sense, coming through. But I think that's good, and I like challenges and things. I like to work with others and go, right, okay, are we getting the same thing? Are we getting the different thing? What are you getting? What age are you? What age would you put your person at, or what year would you
Mm.
put your person at? And I think this
Mm.
is what we should be doing. But I think in all my years of doing mediumship, paranormal, the ego in the market is so vast, so big, that everybody's got to be better than everybody else. Everybody wants to find that crunch point, that one thing that's going to, make them stand out in the industry. And I don't
Mm.
believe that's how the spirit world works. I really don't. I certainly don't class myself any better than any other mediums I've ever worked with. If anything, I'm more respectful of the others that have worked with me than myself, and that was one of the reasons why Colin plagued me for what probably 10, 15 years to work with him, and I kept refusing because I said I'm not good enough, and in a way I regret that now, because he
Mm.
was a very good friend to me over the years. Me and Colin had been friends for probably 20 odd years, and it wasn't until he invited me along to a show, and basically he set me up, and I'm going to be honest about that. He invited me to a show at Retford, which is not far from where I live. And when I got there was a message to go into the dressing room and meet him. When I went into the dressing room, he said, which half are you doing, the first or second? Now, he knows that if he'd have said that to me before, I'd have probably turned around and said neither. And I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have turned up at the show. But obviously, that was the night when he told me that he'd got his stomach cancer, basically. And
Yeah.
that was not a nice sign. But, I think the market is no different to paranormal groups. Every paranormal group wants to be the best paranormal group. They want to go into that building and find that one piece of information. Well, if
Mm.
that piece of information's there, Chris, it doesn't matter whether you go in, I go in, Bob and Mary go in, or
Mm.
Frank and Sheila. We're all going to get something very, very, very similar. It's irrelevant, and I think this is why you see so many groups fold on themselves, because people go into groups and want to start their own group up, or they go on to a paranormal event and they think, oh God, this is easy, I'm going to start a paranormal company up. And again, over the years, I've seen it where people have started companies up and they just don't last, because they haven't got the genuine side to it for me, and people see this, public see it as well a lot of the time, where people are trying to do it all for sort of show rather than do it for the public, and I've always believed that if you're doing a public demonstration or a public show, you've got to do it for the public. They've got to come away with something from it.
Mm. When you're a team and you do public events to the
Mm.
scale that they are done, I go on them. I'm happy to go on them,
Yeah.
but I soon nipped our public events in the bud because I thought that's what you did. Bloody awful. And the teams that investigate with the public, they don't get to investigate. They're just ferrying sheep around from one room to another. I'm like,
Absolutely.
how can you do that? You've not investigated
Yeah.
there. You've stood there while you ramble 40 people ruining the night, and I come away every
Yeah.
time going, that was garbage. You don't take
Yeah.
40 people.
No, absolutely. And you see, the problem is, if you're doing that, you've got to have the right team members there to be able to let people have an experience, whether that's, I mean, I do it very often where I take 30, 40 people, but I'll always have a couple of team members with them. They'll have a box of what I call tricks, which will be anything from a glass, maybe a Ouija board, maybe a table for table tipping, pendulums, EMFs, K2s, etc., etc. But I want the public to have the experience. And it's almost a bit, I always think of it a bit like a training session for the public to go, right, guys, come on, have a go. Right, you have a go with this equipment. But you've got to have somebody there that knows what they're doing. But, I'm just picking up on what you've said. I've been invited along to shows, to public events as the guest medium. And basically, the team that had organised the event, the only reason they got the public there for it was because the public paid for the venue, so the team could go and do their investigation, while the poor old public stood around going, "What do we do then?"
Yeah. And that's how it is. The events locations just wring you dry. It's ridiculous. So you have to take a look. But I can't stand it because as an investigator, I want to investigate. It's like quiet.
Yeah.
How this 40 people, 30 people, whatever, 10 people above you. It's the two. The way it works is rubbish. You need 20 people. You need a free location, and get those people split up as far away from each other as possible. Otherwise, what's the point? You know what I mean?
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I mean, I've hired venues, and I've got venues coming up that I've hired as well. But what I'll always try and do is put people as far away from each other as possible. If you come with your paranormal group, I'd let you go and do your own thing, basically. So yeah, you would fit into our cycle, but I'd just go, right, Chris, you control yourselves. You do what you want. And obviously, some venues will turn around and say, well, you've got to have a team member with them. Well, that's fine. Then I'll put a team member with you, but they don't get involved in your investigation, if you know what I mean. And I think what does frustrate me nowadays, and you just said this yourself a few minutes ago, free investigations or free venues, everybody's cottoned onto it now, and I remember years ago when you could hire any venue was a couple of £100 and they were happy and they'd go away and go, we made £200. And now you're looking at thousands, I mean, I would imagine now the average price, and this is the average price, is probably about £1,000 a night.
Yeah, that's the price whenever I have asked.
Yeah.
So we get in like £50 backhanders, you know what I mean? Or free.
Yeah, and that's what you need to do.
Yeah, they know you're coming. They see you and they think, oh yeah, I'll have a bit of this.
Yeah.
Mediums on my investigations, and I'm not saying, I cannot say that my mediums weren't mediums, okay? I'm taking it as read. They were able to do what they could do, but they weren't useful. As a tool, they were certainly no more too useful than a K2. Yeah, it's flashing, right? Well, what does that mean? It just means that it's taking a reading.
Yeah.
Radio waves, a passing taxi. We don't know what it's reading. And a medium, I've got a Ouija board there, and they'll say, oh, right, I've got a male spirit here. Brilliant. I'm excited. We've got a male spirit here. We've got the Ouija board. Right, spirit, are you male? No. I'm just like, well, you might as well go home. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you I could do that. If it takes me 2 goes to get it right. Yeah, are you a man? No. Are you a woman? Yes. Oh my God, I'm a medium, just as good as you.
But you see, this is where I would. Let's go right back to when we first started talking. If I was doing an investigation with a group, okay, somebody asked me to come along, I'd want to walk through myself with them without any equipment, first of all, and go, right, okay, this room's active, that one's not, this one's got something in it, that one hasn't, this is where you want to be, this is what we're getting. And I'd want people to start writing down what I was picking up, if I'm getting names, if I'm getting dates, if I'm getting ages, if I'm getting, I don't know, things happening, whatever, what sort of activity have we had, as this place had an element of objects being thrown, for instance, what is there? And that's where I think when you're using a medium on an event, and I think I'm going to be honest, I think so many companies have stopped using them because they've lost the understanding of what a medium could do on an event for them. And probably, again, going back to that, maybe a little bit of ego side in a way. But I think going back to basics is very, very good. And I think using a medium as a proper medium, not just using them and going, is there anybody here? Yeah, there is. it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything at all. You've got to be pushing for more and more information.
Mm.
And I've always said to people, it's no different to somebody coming for a sitting with me. When I'm working as a medium, you need to push me for more and more information. The more that somebody asks me a question, the more that they ask me something, the more I'll go back, go back, go back.
Yeah. Spirits tell us that oak is the wood is a great energy giver for them. They've singled out that's the best wood that for whatever reason. So energy sources. Do they drain batteries? Do you think? But let me add that they say they do feed off emotions. They almost consume the energy of
Yeah,
depression. Those
yeah,
are the best energy sources.
yeah.
That's why they allegedly prey on people who are vulnerable at the time. What are your thoughts on that?
I've seen it. I agree with people who aren't in a good place, if I can word it as that, okay? Because I've seen this all too often, and it's almost like it's an easy target for them. If something's going to happen, it'll happen to that person. Now, I also question that a little bit and think, is it the person's mind not in a good place? Is it basically the person thinking, oh my God, it's going to be me? Oh, yeah, it is me.
Yeah.
Okay. Rather than the spirit coming forward and doing it. So, again, I would have to. Question if something happened,
Mm.
I'd have to question the person and go, how were you feeling? Were you feeling all right? Were you a bit, oh no, I'm really down in the dumps. I've had a really bad day, everything's happening to me, blah blah blah. Every event I go on, I always have something happen to me. Oh right, okay, well this is a bit like a message grabber on a reading night then, where everything's going to happen for that one person, because unfortunately the spirit world only see that one person on any event. And again, I would question that quite a lot with people. But I think if we were going into this on a proper sort of basis, I think we've got to be able to let the spirit world take control, will be the way that I'll say it. Now, if they want to go for somebody like me, if they want to go for somebody like you, or they want to go for somebody who's had a real crap day today and not in a good place, well, then we can't change that. None of us can change it. The only difference is people like me and like you would know and be able to stop or control it. Somebody who just come along on an event because, oh,
Mm.
it's a bit of fun, let's have a look and see what happens. They won't
Mm.
really know what's happening around them. So being able to control it is going to be different to what me and you would do, because, I've always had a thing with the spirit world where, you try and do something once to me and I don't accept it, do it twice and forget it. It ain't going to happen at all. But it's no different to a demonstration, a mediumship demonstration. I can guarantee you, every demonstration I do, there'll be one person that can take every message all the way throughout the night, from beginning to end, for 2 hours. And I just think this is just driving me insane, And, I'm quite harsh on events, on demonstrations. And I say, look, I know where I want to be. I know where this message fits. It is not for you. Even though they sat there going, no, it is, it's my nan, it's my mum, it's my dad, my whole of my family's come through. Well, maybe they haven't tonight, okay?
Mm.
But I think there's a lot of people out there that are very much in need, okay, and want to know that there is something else looking after them or out there for them. And I think that's no different to a paranormal event, where we've just got to use an element of safety really with people and
Yeah.
just think, actually, you know what, if this person isn't feeling great, well, I'll tell you what, let's move them somewhere else. Let's put them
Mm.
with somebody else that can nurture them and look after them.
Yeah.
But I do think, in terms of equipment, I've seen it all too often where, you see batteries draining, you see phones draining, torches draining, whatever, And again, we've had this when I've done investigations before, where you actually ask them to start affecting things like torches and like
Yeah.
equipment, etc. I've got to say, some of the classic pieces for me always will be things like the K2s and the EMFs, because they give an instant reaction to people. People see them, they love the lights changing, they love to see
Yeah.
the impact of the lights changing.
Mm.
And I think some of the equipment we've got nowadays is so advanced that members of the public just don't know what the hell's going on with it. It's a
Mm.
bit sort of over the top. But I hope as a medium we don't lose the ethos of what mediums can do and do on events. But remembering what you've just said, I'd be quite disheartened if I come to one of your events and you said, are you picking something up? And I go, Well, I think so, but I'm not sure.
Hmm.
Because then I think I just want to hang up my coat on the back of the door and say, I think my time's up now, Chris. You know, I'm off or whatever. Because you can't do that. You know, I
I'm fine with
miss.
that. I'm fine with that if you
No.
turned up and said, you know what, Chris, I'm not getting anything right now.
Oh,
Because
I've no
if I
problem
open
with
a
that.
Ouija board
Yeah.
and sometimes it's like, sorry, it's not
Right.
happening.
Do you know what? I have no problems with that, and I've done venues times and time again. Sometimes I'll go and it's so active, and
Hmm.
then other times I've gone and thought, you know what, this is dead. There's nothing here tonight. Nothing's
Yeah,
happening for me. Okay, but
yeah.
I think that's healthy. I think that's very, very healthy. But what I'm trying to say is that if I come along and
Hmm.
I'm going to put it very bluntly, I can't be asked, then what's
Ah,
the point of me being there, if you know what I
yeah,
mean? You
no
know, if
point.
I'm going there because I want to go, right, Chris, this is what I'm getting, this is what I'm picking up, this is a
Yeah.
date I'm getting, this is a name I'm getting, this is the room that's active, you
Hmm.
know, and again, you know, again, I hear this time and time again where people go, oh, we called a medium and, you know, they come and joined us for an hour. Yeah, what did they do in an hour then? Probably nothing really, because by the time you got your group organised, there was nothing for them to do anyway.
Right.
You know,
Hmm.
and over the years, I mean, I've cut down my ghost hunting side now because, to be honest, I'm too shattered. You know, and you'll get to that point in another year's time when you caught up with
Hmm.
me. But you know, you get to that point where you're so tired of it doing the same thing time and time again, and I miss the good old private investigations that I used to do years ago,
Hmm.
where we would go into rooms, we would sit there for 2 hours, whatever it took. We'd just sit there, make notes. We might chat to each other. We might throw a few things. We might set up a few experiments, and we just go, right, let's see what happens. But the problem is now, you know, TV and publicity has affected us so much because people go into a room and think in 10 minutes you're going to get an hour's worth of activity.
Yeah.
Suddenly everything's going to start kicking off, and you know we can all go home,
Hmm.
and it doesn't work like that.
It doesn't. No. What's your views on guardian angels?
See,
Ah,
it's I think again it's a for me it's a matter of interpretation. I think a lot of our loved ones come through and guard us from upstairs. You know, I know in my case I've got my own characters that look after me, if I call it that, and I very often call
hmm.
them gatekeepers or doorkeepers.
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of interpretation for people. You know, we've got people that you know, acknowledge fairies. We've got them that acknowledge angels. We've got them that acknowledge all sorts of characters nowadays. And I just think it's a matter of interpretation. But I
Hmm.
think there's always somebody looking out for us or looking after us. That might be a grandma, granddad, mum, dad, whatever, animals, whatever. Something's always going to take care of us. I mean, you know, speaking from my own experience, when I started sitting for working for Spirit many, many years ago, I've still got the same character that comes through time and time again, and there's no relation to me whatsoever. He's just always been there. I recognise him whenever I go in to do an altered state of work, and he just stands there and stands at my door. So I just call him my doorkeeper now. That's it.
Yeah. Well, Spirit's told us that if you bother going through your levels, you can
Yeah,
become what they called a being of pure light, which in a sense is you go down to earth as a being of pure light and you can choose a character or a family to kind of just guide, to hint at, to nudge, to like, oh,
yeah.
just don't, we'll be careful, don't go
We,
down there.
which
Well,
is a bit like what I'm saying in a strange way, where I go,
mm,
I think we have loved ones that look after us and do that for us.
yeah, which is the obvious choice, that's what they would do. But certain members of my family probably would be like, no, you're meant to learn. I could do my
Mm,
son's homework for him, come down and put my hand on his paper, do all the answers, but he's not going to learn. And if you're like,
no,
they're
no,
there to learn, why would I go? Why
yeah,
hasn't my gran visited me now she's dead? Because she's doing her thing, you're doing yours. You know.
she's too busy. Yeah, she's too busy upstairs. That's what she's doing. But
Yeah.
I do believe that we all have to go through times of experience. I'll call it that again. I keep saying that word experience. And I think that's what makes you a sensitive person, what you've
Mm.
been through.
I took my sister to see Colin Fry in Blackpool in his after most haunted sort of notoriety patch. And I have to say, I sat there for I don't know, maybe an hour, hour and a half, and he was like never seemed to put a foot wrong.
Mm.
To the point that any skepticism that I might have withheld at the back of my head was like, he couldn't have memorised all that. They can't all be stooges. And that's why I took my sister to see him, because I was like, this guy's just, everything I hear about him is great.
Yeah.
So to see him work, it was like, look, the guy's so talented at whatever he's doing, and he's made so many people happy. And it wasn't even, oh, is it you or the person next to you? It was like, it was you. And this is what I'm
Oh,
telling
I
you.
know.
Done.
Yeah.
And yeah, the craftsmanship of the guy. I mean, I haven't seen you live, I'll be honest, but that was like, my God, there was no
Yeah.
ifs or buts. He was a sharpshooter.
Tremendous. I mean, I love watching Colin work, and even Derek. I've seen Derek work numerous times. Both very, very good sort of friends of mine, and I really admire those characters. You mentioned earlier a lady who I greatly admired when I was growing up, Doris Stokes. And her manager actually took me on board many, many years ago now, and
Oh,
helped
wow.
me a lot before he passed away. And Doris Stokes, I remember, because she used to do a lot of theatres and they used to publicise it, if you remember. It used to go on television and things like that. And I used to think, oh my God, isn't she amazing? Where's she
Yeah.
getting all this info from? And you can go way back. You start looking at some of the physical mediums, start looking at people like Helen Duncan, for instance, who really didn't get a lot of good credit for a time because obviously they were so trying to prove that she was a fraud and a fake. And there's some real characters out there who I greatly admire, Estelle Roberts, filling places like the Royal Albert Hall. And, will we ever see people like that? It's funny because I had this conversation with somebody not so long ago. And I said, I think the problem is nowadays, we just aren't as committed as what they were. Nowadays we have equipment, we have computers, laptops, iPads, televisions, whereas they used to sit night after night after night in seances just to try and make things work. Even my mum's family, when they lived in Glasgow in the tenements, they used to do seances all the time, and even used to invite the priest along to sit with them. So it just shows you how we've changed. We talk about children changing, but it's not just children nowadays. It's us as adults. We don't commit to things anymore. I think we love watching it on TV and thinking, oh gosh, this is great. All these things are going to happen. I've been to some venues that are supposedly very haunted, and I've come away quite disappointed, thinking, well, actually, if that was haunted, I've had more activity in my own home. And I think we just have to be careful not to be misled. But I think we also have to be able to commit and put the time into it as well. That's what I would say to people.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what's your feelings on ghosts? I'm going to say orbs. I hate the word. After reviewing so much night vision footage, I know dust when I see it. And I can create it. The fact is, I can create orbs by hitting my cushions together and taking pictures. But your view, separate from mine, what do you think is possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, okay. So I love this question. I really do. Now, I'm going to look at this in two ways, because I always do. So if we look at this from a paranormal perspective, I agree with you. I think 99% of it probably is just an element of dust where somebody's swung a door open or shook an old curtain or sat in an old chair, and suddenly you've had this puff of light, puff of energy go off, and it just covers the room. Now, what I tend to like better is when you do things like locked off cameras in rooms, for instance, and we can leave them there. And then you can almost watch what's happening in the room from outside, and we lock the door, we close the door and lock the door so nobody else can go in. So you're almost giving the room time to settle. So if somebody's walked in and shook something up, it's settled. But what I would look at is I would look at the track of light, for instance. So if you've got, say, an orb happening, then I'd look at how it happens. We know very often they'll just go straight across the screen. But if it starts moving around a little bit and I start thinking, oh, that's a bit weird how it's doing that, why would it do that? Is there a window open? Is there a draft or something? And that's what I would tend to look at. Now, from a perspective of doing it from a physical perspective, so I'm talking physical mediumship now, we know that when we sit for physical, we get these balls of energy that starts coming into the room, and they start almost like pardon me, I'll say it, multiplying in a strange way. And that light will then move around the room, and it'll move either to medium or move to individuals. And it's almost like a little bit of a direct voice box that then starts speaking in a strange way. So, I know I've got some great friends, and I've had many disputes about orbs. Now, I am very open. I'm not one of these who go, "Oh no, oh my God, everything's paranormal." And that's what I'm trying to say right from the beginning. I am not one of those people who go into a room and go, "Everything's paranormal." What I will do is I would analyze it. But if I see that on a paranormal investigation and 40 people have just walked in the room, there's going to be an element of dust thrown around straight away. If I'm doing a physical demonstration, and I've got a controlled environment where people are sat in chairs, but suddenly we start to see things starting to multiply or expand, then I'd have to question that and go, actually, this is a bit more than dust particles, for instance. I mean, in our physical circle, we've had hands form, we've had faces coming out the wall, we've had babies crying in the room. None of us have got children, by the way, and all these sort of things start happening. And what we do is I tend to be the medium that sits in a cabinet, and everybody knows what a cabinet is. It's basically a curtained area or a curtained cabinet where the medium sits in a chair, and we put toys around the floor outside the cabinet near me. And what happens is very often we can hear things being played or plonked. So like, old-fashioned xylophones, what we used to have when we were children, we put things like that on the floor, and very often you'll hear them being tapped or moved. But they are outside the cabinet away from me. I couldn't physically touch them.
So
but yeah, but anyway, yeah.
why?
So there you go.
Why does that happen? What is the whole need for being hidden from? It's like, why
It's
would a
not being
spirit give a
hidden. No.
goddamn?
It's not being hidden. It's purely for the fact of I've gone into an altered state. So I'm. How do you say it? I'm compass mentis. No, I'm not. I'm not compass mentis. I'm out of it, basically.
You're
I'm
in an
a
embarrassed
sleep state.
trance, and you don't want people to see you drooling. I don't like it. I just don't like it. I've been on trance medium evenings where, well, I was in one.
This is
I've been
not
on
trans medium, remember. This is not
okay.
trans medium. This is physical mediumship. So I don't communicate. I go into an altered state, and what happens is things start happening in the room then when I've gone into an altered state. So we're not talking trance. We're not talking of me sitting in a chair and going, "Oh, hello, Chris. I'm the Chinese man from upstairs," or whatever. We're not talking about that. We're talking about physical mediumship.
So
manifesting things.
What's different? Why all the investigations I've done, the spirit's not playing xylophones for me, but when you sit in a box, it happens?
Because I give them the time and I use my energy to do that. I use my energy to do that. That's the difference. Whereas on a public event, you would probably find people just wouldn't want to sit still long enough to do it.
Oh no, forget public events.
Yeah, they wouldn't want to do it. They'd want things to happen instantly.
Yeah. So if I sat for my team in a cabinet, am I giving them the energy? Would it work?
It depends how advanced you are in terms of your mediumship ability.
Oh, not at all.
Well, then it wouldn't happen then. That's the difference.
I mean, it's I'm afraid on that account, it's this mass thing that I would love to see, and I believe it's possible because I choose, I want to believe that. What?
Yeah, you're looking at it very simply, just in terms of somebody sat there and waiting for things to happen. It doesn't, honestly. Trust me, we've sat for physical now for many, many, many years. There's some of the great physical mediums still out there to this very day. Gordon Higginson, who was a tremendous physical medium as well. And these are things that take a lot of time to sort of give the advancement of the medium.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm on the flip side as well, because our using a Ouija board, I believe that our teamwork, having done it, it gets easier and it gets faster, whereas you see people on Reddit, "I did a Ouija board last night and nothing happened." And it's like, you've done it one day, mate. One day might not be enough.
Absolutely. And that's exactly like what I'm trying to say to you about physical mediumship. You can't just sit in a cabinet and go, "I've done it, Barry, it all worked."
Yeah.
It takes a long time. I mean, when we sit for our physical circle, just on what would you call it? On like a night when we sit. So not a night where we want things to happen. We will sit for a minimum of 2 hours, and we will sit in a small room. I'll be in an altered state for as long as possible, and then basically we wait for things starting to happen.
Do you? This is the last question. I've kept you long enough.
That's all right.
Do you think that if I was using a Ouija board and I said, right now I want you, Jeremy, to go to Barrie John, go find Barrie John, and say Chris sent you. Do you think there's a chance? Is that even possible that you'd go, hang on, what? Chris sent me. Oh, I talked to the other day. You called Jeremy. And do you think that you could then message me saying, apparently I've got to tell you that Jeremy says hi or something?
Well, yeah, actually, I do believe that. I believe that if we're advanced enough, as long as I'm not sat on a beach on holiday, and if people know me, I'm normally sat on a beach on holiday somewhere. But if that's how you want it to work, then yes, I would say that. I would say yes, it'll work.
Because this is my last point now. What I've done with mediums and with my own team to rule them out, I've said, right, everybody, I'm going to go over behind this wall and I'm going to write a big letter on this board, and meet you there, medium. You've got a good connection with this person we've been talking to for an hour. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm going to just write a letter on this board, and then I want either you or the Ouija board ghost, who's supposedly the same person, to tell me which letter it is, right? How hard is that? The medium is speaking, getting all this information. All it has to say is, Chris, you have wrote it on the board, right? But what I do is I then write a number to rule out the medium's human ability, to rule out my human Ouija board folk. Yeah. And I come round and I say, I wrote 9. And they all go, no, you said a letter. And I'm like, shouldn't matter to the spirit. The spirit will be like, he wrote 9. Is that fair?
Absolutely, yeah. And I agree with that. I think that's the way that people, we should be tested, if that makes sense. That sounds awful in a way, doesn't it? But I think we should be, because we're trying to prove that there's an element of existence and intelligence up there. And I think whatever you're doing, it's not for me to see, it's for them upstairs to see and go, well, actually, no, he didn't write a letter, he just wrote a number down, or I don't know, he's drawn a bucket and spade. Yeah. And that's where I think it should be, that element of testing. I really do. I've always said this.
I don't think that's cruel. I don't think it's cheeky. I think it's absolutely fair, and would be how much I would raise that medium or my team onto my shoulders and say, you did it, we did it, guys, we proved it,
Yeah, but I think, again, it depends what you're looking for. Are you looking to test the medium, or are you testing the venue in terms of paranormal activity? And I think that's what we'd have to, I don't want to say question, that sounds awful, but that's what we'd have to look at and go, well, actually, am I going into an experiment with you for us to have a bit of a play around and go, right, out of 10 questions, I've got 9 of them wrong or 9 of them right, not compared to a paranormal investigation.
Yeah, no, I just didn't think it was a dirty trick. I thought it was a valid test. But
I think it's a very interesting one, Chris.
The mediums didn't like it. And I was like, okay.
Well, but Chris, I'll go back to what I said a few minutes ago. From a mediumship perspective, no medium should have a problem working together if they're working with mediumship. It's when people start working with egos, where they want to be better than everybody else. And as I said, when I get invited on a public event or a paranormal event, I'm not going there to profess that I'm the best person ever for the job. I'm going there to go, I'm doing my job. This is what I'm getting. That's all I can do.
Well, Barrie, it's been an absolute gift finally getting to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for putting me on the spot, Chris. Thank you. I will get you back to that. No, you're all right. It's my pleasure.